Hello everyone and welcome back. So, Inteleon raids. Tera Ice Inteleon. This thing is a glass cannon with a very weak defensive typing. This is going to be such an easy fight. There are so many good solo options too. There are so many options to use against this thing for the co-op and the solos. We actually do not have time to list all of them because we would quite literally be here all day. We're going to try and cover a lot of the specific ones, but most of what we cover here is actually applicable to almost every Pokemon of these archetypes. Starting off, we've got the two, in my opinion, best ones, Annihilape and Kingambit. The reason why I say these are the best of the best is two reasons. One, their stabs are super effective against ice, but also they have Defiant. It is very likely that Inteleon is going to have the move Tearful Look. This is one of its few status setup moves. The other ones being Swords Dance, which is not likely to have Double Team or Growl. And because of the way Defiant actually works, if Tearful Look is used on them, because Tearful Look is a one-stage physical attack debuff and a one-stage special attack debuff, this gives them a +3 to Defiant, effectively. You get +4, but because of the -1 for the attack, it comes out to -3. This is insane, considering they have very good offensive stats, they have very strong stabs, and Inteleon is again a glass cannon. They are both also quite bulky. You might be worried about, well, what if Inteleon has Air Slash or Shadow Ball for Annihilate? At absolute worst, assuming you get hit by the maximum roll of a Shadow Ball for Annihilate twice, you are left with 1 HP. You are perfectly fine, and then you Drain Punch, and you heal yourself. Both of these will want Adamant Nature and 252 EVs in physical attack. For Annihilape, you actually want 252 speed EVs. This is because you can actually outspeed Inteleon by 3 points with this investment, whereas the Kingambit will want this in HP. One of the reasons why I say Annihilape is better is also because of that speed advantage. There's only 2 possible ways for Inteleon to outspeed you. If it uses Agility, which it's not likely to have, or it uses Icy Wind, which in turn pops Defiant. Either way, it's a benefit for you. Their respective setup moves is going to be Bulk Up and Screech for the Annihilape, and Swords Dance for the Kingambit. One of the other reasons why I say Annihilape is also a bit better aside from the speed is actually the way damage calculations work. Even if you are a +1 Bulk Up Annihilape with a -2 defense Inteleon, your Drain Punch still does more damage than a +2 or even +3 Kingambit. There's also outside of the necessary items. Kingambit will need to be holding the Shell Belt in order to get that passive healing, whereas Annihilape can actually go for something like a Life Orb or Expert Belt, or really any item of your choice for them, which is actually why Annihilape is preferable for soloing, but also just works better in co-op. Though Kingambit is still one of the best. We'll be going into more solo details at the end of this, because again, there's a lot of very easy solo options for this. But before we move on to the next options, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you guys are new. It would very much help the channel out. But now onto the next options. And these are Tinkaton and Koraidon, both of which are actually quite good for very different reasons. However, they generally come down to the same basic principle: Swords Dance access with an obscenely powerful stab, with, of course, Tinkaton being Gigaton Hammer and Koraidon being Collision Course, which does bonus damage if super effective. Both of these, if you get a single Swords Dance up, and Inteleon is at -6, it gets one-shot by these. Tinkaton needs a Helping Hand boost in order to get that one-shot knockout with Gigaton Hammer, but Koraidon doesn't. Both will want an Adamant 252 effort value distribution, and Koraidon will actually want the weakness policy for this. This is actually just a little bit of a redundancy for if you get hit by an ice-type move, you proc the weakness policy, get an even bigger offensive boost. So even if a Screech misses, you can still cover that damage gap. Koraidon will be wanting Swords Dance, Collision Course, and Screech itself. Tinkaton pretty much just needs Swords Dance and Gigaton Hammer. It doesn't get a defense debuffing move on its own, so it's pretty much just Swords Dancing turn 1 and doing nothing else. Tinkaton will appreciate the Life Orb as a held item, and because of its obscene special defense, there really isn't much that Inteleon can do against it. Iron Hands is a bit of a combination of both Koraidon and Tinkaton, in that it goes for Swords Dance and Drain Punch. Yes, you actually don't even need Belly Drum here. In fact, Belly Drum is actively a negative to have, because you're cutting your own HP in half, you're slower than Inteleon and getting it off 2 moves, you're going to be knocked out. Swords Dance You keep your health, it can't knock you out in 2 moves, and then you just go for Drain Punch and you heal yourself back up. Alternatively, a one-shot for this is max, of course, max attack, Adamant Nature, 252 EVs, Life Orb, Swords Dance, and if the Inteleon is -6 on defense, close combat one-shots. Yes, a single Swords Dance is all you need. Before we continue on, I would like to also remind everything here needs to be level 100. Many of my associates have mentioned that some people bring in like level 60s and things. Everything here needs to be level 100 to face these Pokemon. The next Pokemon is one that actually does not need any support options. In fact, it's just itself pasted over 4 times, and that's Berserker. The reason why I say this is that it gets access to Screech, and it gets access to a very unique ability, Steely Spirit. A singular Swords Dance. In fact, if you actually go with a 3 Screech support into Iron Head, you don't even need Swords Dance. A singular Adamant 252 Life Orb Iron Head will one-shot a -6 defense Inteleon. This is because of the way Steely Spirit works. It, unlike other abilities, actually stacks. So if you have 4 Steely Spirit Berserker, you have a 50% boost on top of 50% boost on top of 50% boost on top of a 50% boost. That comes out to over 5 times normal damage, essentially making an 80 base power Iron Head over 400 base power. You just need a Life Orb and the Adamant Nature, and Inteleon's gone. Another sort of off-meta counter is one that actually a friend of mine sort of made me think about, and that is Corviknight. This is again a solo option and a support user, so we'll be covering its more solo kit later, but really going to be covering its support kit now, and that is Screech and Metal Sound. Been a fantastic supporter in the previous ones. For this one, you're going to want either, if you're using a support Corviknight strictly, you're going to want max HP, max special defense, and leftovers held item. The solo set is going to be a little different, and we'll be covering that later. For the support options, now this next section is basically going to be dedicated to 2 classes of Pokemon. The general setup Drain Punch users, and the thing that isn't setup Drain Punch. And the one that isn't setup Drain Punch is actually Gallade. Gallade is fantastic and actually very different than every single other one of the attackers for 2 reasons. One, its best move is not Drain Punch. And second, it has obscene special defense that can chunk anything Inteleon can throw at it. Gallade is going to want Adamant Nature, 252 physical attacking EVs, the Sharpness ability, and either your choice of max HP or max special defense. Because of how insane Gallade's special defense actually is, using the move Sacred Sword with Swords Dance in conjunction with the Shell Bell heals more damage than you are taking from either Air Slash or Shadow Ball from Inteleon. The only reason I mention Gallade separately is because of the way Sacred Sword works. Sacred Sword ignores defense buffs and defense debuffs. This means an Inteleon can be at +6 defense, it can be at 0 defense, it can be at -6 defense. How much damage Sacred Sword does not matter. Those defenses are completely irrelevant. Sacred Sword essentially treats everything as though it is 0 defense. It only depends on what your attack is. But this does a huge amount of damage, because again, Sharpness boosts your damage by 50%, it is same type attack bonus, and you heal a lot of damage every time you use this. All you're going to need for this is, again, Sharpness, Swords Dance, Sacred Sword, and just Crush. Now, as for the other archetype, the literally everything else, the reason why we're doing this as the literally everything else is this is applicable to basically every single fighting type, and if we listed each one out individually, we would be here all day. They are the setup Drain Punch users. I mentioned Annihilate separately and Iron Hands separately, specifically because Annihilate's Defiant, and Iron Hands doesn't actually want Belly Drum for this, because I know a lot of people probably go for Belly Drum Iron Hands, which is actively negative here. For this, you just want Swords Dance. This category is applicable to things like Medicham, Lucario, and, again, everything else. And that is, if they get Bulk Up or they get Swords Dance, you're going to want that, and then you just Drain Punch. Unless the fighting type is 4 times weak to flying, or it is weak to water, and or does not learn Drain Punch, I would not recommend using them here. Which means like stuff like Medicham is fantastic, Lucario, a bit risky, but still quite good. And special mention goes to Toxicroak. This is because Toxicroak is immune to water, and it gets Acid Spray support, so it can be a supporter, it gets Swords Dance, it gets a Drain Punch. Overall, it's quite solid. A little bit risky, because it is a bit more frail and it does have lower offensive power, but it can still work quite well. In addition to Toxicroak, one off-fighting attacker that's actually fantastic at this is Azumarill. Because of its typing, there really isn't much Inteleon can do against it, so it can actually safely set up Belly Drum and use Drain Punch itself. Now, let's get on to the support options. But please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe before we get onto them. And our support options here are basically the exact same they have always been. Your fantastic Revavroom, Screech Acid Spray, Screech Fake Tears Umbreon is a frickin' brick wall. You're gonna want Screech users more than Acid Spray users here. The reason being, most of the best options are physical attackers for this. Again, Corviknight, as we have mentioned before, with its Screech tech. There's also where Annihilate kind of slots in, because again, it does get Screech, but also is an attacker. Basically, everything here, you're going to want max special defense, maximum HP, and either the Wide Lens or the Leftovers Held Item. I would generally say the Leftovers is a little bit, the Wide Lens is a little bit better here, because again, these things are not meant for doing damage, and these fights are meant to go down very, very quickly. If possible, to learn Helping Hand, you're going to want to tack on Helping Hand. Now, solo time. This section is also going to be quite long, so strap in. We've already covered Annihilate more or less, but now time to go into a little bit more of the details about why it, I would say, is the best solo option here. Because of the way damage actually works, a +1 Annihilate hitting a -2 defense Inteleon does more damage than, say, a +3 Kingambit. As well as the better offensive move, Drain Punch, and the lack of needing the Shell Bell lets you do even more damage on top of already doing more damage. Plus, your better speed stats. The Drain Punch gives you long-term battle sustain while outpacing the Inteleon, giving you the advantage for a long-term battle. The only way Inteleon can actually beat you is landing a critical hit, which pretty much takes out most things because of Sniper ability, or it needs to get lucky with a special defense drop, but a special defense drop would activate your Defiant, meaning you deal even more damage to the Annihilator. So, even at your worst, you're still doing really well? Again, Kingambit also is fantastic, a little bit more risky, I would say, because again, lower speed stats, but fantastic. This is where the Corviknight I mentioned came in. For the solo Corviknight, there's actually 2 different ways you can run it. You can either run it with maximum HP and maximum physical defense with the Leftovers Held Item, and Iron Defense Body Press, because Iron Defense Body Press actually does more damage than Bulk Up Iron Head because of the way that Body Press works. Or you can go for maximum HP, maximum special defense with Leftovers. There's pros and cons to both of these. The pros of the first set, the defense focus set as we'll call it, is you do more damage with Body Press. However, you take more damage from Inteleon's moves because of a lower special defense stat. The trade-off for the special defensive set, you take a lot less damage from Inteleon, but you do a lot less damage with Body Press. So, it's essentially a longer fight or a shorter fight where you take more damage. It really comes down to your choice here. The next solo one is actually Tinkaton, because Swords Dance, Massive Special Defense, Gigaton Hammer. Now, with Tinkaton, it's a little bit more awkward because it has no defensive debuffing move, and you're going to basically have to alternate between Swords Dance once or twice, really depending on what you feel comfortable with. Generally, I feel lesser setup is a little bit better for these. So, your preferred number of Swords Dances. First off, lead Gigaton Hammer to, get the Gigaton Hammer before it actually stat purges, if it does stat purge. Then, after that, I would recommend using exclusively Rock Smash or Brick Break until you build up your Terastalize. Then you Gigaton Hammer again. Reason for this, and you don't just spam Gigaton Hammer, is Gigaton Hammer locks you out of being able to use it after you've used it the previous turn. So you have to go Gigaton Hammer, other move, Gigaton Hammer, other move. And with as few power points as it has, and the game's fondness for Tera charge stealing, you might not get to use a Tera Steel Gigaton Hammer, which will deal obscene damage. The Gallade, as we have mentioned before, actually works far better in the solo than it does in the team fight. Swords Dance, Sacred Sword, pretty much good to go. Again, Shell Bell held item. Everything other than the Iron Hands, the Drain Punch, well, I guess anything other than a Drain Punch user, you're going to want the Shell Bell on them because they need that healing. Aside from the Corviknight, where the Corviknight wants leftovers because it's a much more defensive Pokemon. Again, basically everything else, Bulk Up or Swords Dance, Drain Punch users, work quite well here. However, they are a little bit more risky because without the reliable support setup that you can get very quickly, they do take more damage, especially considering most fighting types tend to be a bit more on the frail side, as well as the access to Air Slash that Inteleon is likely to get. Now, there is another thing that I did sort of allude to, and that is, of course, the Tearful Look. This is why I say Annihilate is probably your best option, because Tearful Look is a move that decreases both physical and special attack. Likely Inteleon will get this, and this does cut into every single attacker that doesn't have a move like Defiant, an ability like Defiant, or competitive. Now, there's no competitive Pokemon users that are able to really do much super effective damage, the only ones being the Defiant users for physical attacks. Which is one of the reasons I did focus a bit more on the Annihilate and the King Gambit. To a degree, the Corviknight with access to Mirror Armor reflects this back, but it is something to be aware of, that these other options may not necessarily work as well, other than potentially Azumarill because of Belly Drum, because all of your boosts could be relatively easily neutralized. As well as, again, the more glassy nature of most fighting types doesn't really pair super well. Glass Cannon versus Glass Cannon, the one with the 30 to 35 times health is probably going to end up winning that, but they can all work quite well if you get the timing down. So, that's been everything here. Again, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you guys are new. We do Tera Raid guys like this all the time, and if Inteleon has some crazy insane combo thing that just completely bodies this, like say it's a physical Inteleon with Swords Dance, we'll be doing a bit of a reissue of this, but I will see you guys next time. Let's rock and roll up.